Hi, I'm Shay McGalley.
And I'm David Keener.
And this is the Hourlings podcast project. Tonight, Dave's driving a bus. Dave, take it away.
All right. So we're going to talk about the writers' strike in Hollywood. So for a little bit of context, the Writers Guild of America, which represents two organizations, Writers Guild East and Writers Guild West, has decided to go on strike. It wasn't 98% of the membership voted for this. And a lot of the reasons are basically technology based. So my first question for my audience here is for my fellow compatriots rather is what are some of the technological things that are really impacting writers in Hollywood right now?
So ChatGTP, I suppose,
Chat GPT is definitely high up on the list.
Yeah, the AI interfaces that can be used to generate stuff or modify them more likely because, when they have a TV show or a movie or whatever, they usually have a writer on set. If the director doesn't feel that a scene is going appropriately, it's like, hey, get the writer in here. We got to rewrite this scene, or we need to have a new line for this because this one is not pithy enough, or whatever the director says. None of that's happening. I did find out in reading about this in advance that if a studio already has purchased the rights for a script, they can still film it. They just can't have a writer on set to help them if changes need to be made. So that's a very interesting point for this whole thing.
I did have a
not
thought.
all productions are stopping.
Yeah.
Some that are still going, especially where the director fancies himself as a writer and he can change stuff on the fly, with a pencil.
I did have a thought on this. And to our viewers, I'm getting over a cold, so I sound like a dying elephant. So I hope you can understand me. But I think this could go one of two ways. One, I've noticed there's a lot of disenchantment right now with ChatGTP in multiple professions and fields. So we talked about academia at length here on the podcast when we talked about ChatGTP. And I recently read a professor assigned a very interesting assignment to his students. He had them use ChatGPT to write a full-length, essay. But then the assignment was to go through it with a red pen and find the false information, misquotes, inaccuracies, made up stuff. And it was very eye-opening for the students to do that, to exercise, and to see how much they're really flat out being lied to by ChatGPT. And there's a lot of anger around this. A lot of people are saying, boycott anything that has AI in it, creatively boycott it. So I think that people could cancel. We talk about canceling on here. They could cancel ChatGPT, and that could be, the victory that the strike needs. The other way that it could go is, if this program gets a lot better, as we've talked about before, and it does have accuracies, and it is producing interesting content and stories, then we might have another problem. But I don't project that happening for another 15 years.
I think there's another terminology which I've heard recently, which I was quite amused by. The people who are sort of against AI interfering in the writing field have taken to calling them plagiarism engines, since really all they do is mix and match content they retrieve from elsewhere, and in most cases they are using proprietary content illegally, i.e., they don't have the rights for it. I want to be careful about going too far down the AI
Sure.
rabbit hole.
Right, because there's a lot of moving parts with the strike.
Yeah.
Everything from residuals to, contract negotiations, all kinds of stuff. And
yeah, you're right. There's a lot of moving parts, and AI is definitely in the mix, but it is. I think people look at it as a potentially existential threat, but it's not. It's only one of the threats right now. Okay, what are some other technological things?
Well, the technology associated with streaming is one of the issues that's on the table. I didn't realize any of this stuff because of the way streaming works. It kind of, depending on the level of assholery, it puts a a dam in there for residuals for writers, you know, because, hey, we're not making money on, you know, the show. We get paid for subscriptions. And, you know, they haven't really, you know, the legal fine print just doesn't seem to have caught up with the mass use of streaming services everywhere these days.
Yeah, so we should talk a little bit about residuals. So for those who don't know, residuals in the streaming era is basically money that has to be paid to writers if their content is actually available for streaming on a streaming provider like Netflix or Disney Plus. So there's also, how do you feel about some of the recent incidents where companies have decided to cut their costs on residuals?
Oh, before we get away from the streaming thing, you see, back in the days, it was easy to, you know, monitor what residuals a person should be getting. You know, the show would come out, you would see, you know, Friends, and the writers would get paid, and then if it came up in reruns, you know, then for every, you know, broadcast of the show, they would, you know, have a set of residuals. But now with streaming, you're suddenly getting, you know, you can stream every episode of the Flintstones. You can, you know, stream shows that have not been on television. You know, Mary Tyler Moore, Bewitched from back in the day. And how's that residuals filtering down to those people? And that's just a little tiny facet of this diamond of the
well, see, that's another technology. It's the whole monitoring aspect of where residuals and monitoring intersect. So
right.
in the good old days of broadcast, you had Nielsen ratings, right? Right now, streaming services don't actually report. They say something's a hit, but they don't actually report the numbers and stuff.
Yeah, and it's
one thing that I thought about with you know, streaming services changing the game is I wondered how writers felt when they were snubbed of a theatrical release, you know, for their screenplay. You would think that that would be something that is aspired towards. And a lot of them are, you know, like even Pixar, their last release was, maybe not their last one, one of the recent ones was Turning Red. That was not theatrical release. That was streaming service. So I wonder if that's going to be a point of issue as well.
It's hard to say, and I since I am not a practicing screenwriter, it's not something I really have insight into.
Yeah.
I will say there's this thought process that in the old days, if your show on TV was a hit, like Marty mentioned, Friends, right? Then clearly lots of eyeballs were watching your show, and you were contributing to the network's success as demonstrated by Nielsen ratings, right? So you got bonuses for having a popular show. But in streaming, none of that information is open. And so there's nothing to say that you as a writer should get paid more for, say, Stranger Things than for, you know, pick whatever one season canceled Netflix series.
Yeah, I also wonder how, like in the old days, Saturday Night Live would go up on Saturday, and you had to be there in your chair to be watching it in order to see it at all. Right now, you can actually go and look at, you know, Saturday Night Live episodes from the 70s. And even weirder than that, because that is probably a countable issue, but what about the segments that are shown on YouTube and stuff? I can't tell you how many times I've seen like an Eddie Murphy, you know, I'm Gumby Damn It skit on YouTube. How the hell do they apply residuals for that stuff? It's a conundrum.
Well, and the answer is, as far as the corporations are, they would like not to, because if it's not covered in the contract, they won't do it. Right.
And I also have read some articles about this whole thing and how it's like turning into a class war in Hollywood. Like, oh, just you peasants, just sit down and write this content. Just shut up and, do what we tell you and take the money we give you, and then
Although
just sit down and shut up.
There's been a lot of support from prominent actors though. So like I saw a picture of Dan Levy, Eugene Levy's son, picketing with the writers, and so I think that there is definitely, it is a class war, I agree, but there is definitely some what's the word, movement, I guess, between classes.
Yeah, I think that there's writers, they're one faction, actors, another faction. There's directors, which is another faction, and then there is the corporate production machines that are just out there looking for the next, $200 million, blockbuster that's going to hit.
So it's also
$1 billion one now. It's gotten so ridiculous.
So it's also interesting that this is what's being negotiated is a contract that gets negotiated and renewed every 3 years. But the WGA, the Writers Guild of America, is the first of the various unions to come up for negotiation. Since you've mentioned them, the Directors Guild of America, the DGA, comes up for renewal in June. They've already submitted a proposal to, let's see, the name of the organization is the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, which is what they're negotiating with. And they have already had their proposal rejected by that organization. Also in June, SAG-AFTRA, which is the Screen Actors Guild, their contract is up for renewal as well. So while the writer's strike might not shut everything down, because we're coming at the end of a season, screenplays that have already been received can be directed. If the Directors Guild or the Screen Actors Guild decides to go out, Hollywood shuts down.
Yeah, well, a lot of shows are shutting down already. All the late night, talk shows, comedy shows. I didn't know that they had so many writers working for them. The things like Saturday Night Live, that's a no-brainer. Even the streaming big guys like Bill Maher and those folks, they are, they're totally shut down already. And once the productions that are currently in the works right now go through all the scripts and all the content that they have, then it gets even more problematic. I hope they figure this shit out before too long, because damn it, I need my next season of The Mandalorian.
Yeah. Well, another one is the IATSE. Don't ask me what it stands for, but basically it represents all the below the line workers. The electricians and the cameramen and all those people that are referred to as below the line. They're considering honoring the the Writers Guild strike as well.
Yeah, if every cameraman goes out, says, "Hey, sorry." Now, and the problem is, it's impacting the working dudes. The guys that are living paycheck to paycheck and got an ex-wife and and 3 kids with child support. Those are the guys that are really getting hurt by the whole thing.
Yeah, the grips and the lighting and all that. Yeah.
The gaffers, man.
Yeah.
Gaffers, they need a guild.
I have kind of a list of issues that I gleaned from my readings. So I'll toss out a couple of the things, and then you guys can comment on how you feel about them. One is viewership-based streaming residuals rather than flat rate.
Seems fair.
Corporations are majorly against that.
Yeah, I know, because the more people watch, the more money that the writers will get, but the subscription fees don't increase at all. Unless they, increase their viewership by getting more subscriptions.
Yeah, on the other hand,
subscriptions being not bound to the actual viewing, because like Netflix has like 1.5 billion people now on it, and 10 million people watching Stranger Things or whatever is a really good a good showing for that, and but may not increase viewership.
Now I'm going to play
I think
devil's advocate.
it
Go ahead.
also increases incentive to write a good story.
Yeah.
When you have skin in the game. So I think it's great. I think it could work out for both ends. Maybe they don't see it right now.
Yeah, I'll also point out if it's streaming based, I mean, if it's viewership based, then I would expect that Stranger Things should make more money and that reruns of I Dream of Jeannie will make less because while there are people that will watch it, it's not going to be a huge amount.
Yeah.
Okay. We've mentioned AI, but I read about specific. So many people can work on a screenplay in Hollywood, right? So what if you use AI to generate a bad screenplay and then you pay screenwriters to revise it? That's the kind of thing that they're worried about, right? And then SAG-AFTRA is really worried about the AI and the use of likenesses or the use of machine-generated voices. Removing entertainment so residuals don't need to be paid.
I don't understand that one at all.
It's like taking something off a streaming service so they don't have to pay.
Yeah. Like Warner Brothers, both Warner Brothers Discovery did this. They took 80 or 90 shows off of HBO Max so that they didn't have to pay for them anymore. There's no indication that they'll ever be available anywhere else, although they might be.
So the question is whether that should be allowed or not.
Well, if you use it as an excuse not to pay your writers. Canceling a completed film. Again, Warner Brothers Discovery did this. They decided not to release Batgirl. They'd rather take a loss and not have to spend the money to promote it and stuff. So they actually just took a finished film and just tanked it.
It was like totally cut and everything.
Done.
Wow.
Bonuses.
Is that because they thought that the film was going to do so poorly that they would not be able to make back? I don't see how that is a business decision in any shape. If the product is already completed.
They have. It's not just that one. That was one of the more noticeable ones. There were some other projects too. So even if Batgirl was the worst movie ever, there were other projects that probably were releasable. They just tanked them all because they were trying to reduce their debt load. Another big one, I think we mentioned this, bonuses for a successful show. That's, you used to get that in the Nielsen era. Any other thoughts on the writer's strike and some of the issues?
Oh, I think there was something else I was reading that I was going to mention. Oh, there's also isn't there a point about how easy it is for international releases now that are completely unmonitored, and it could be 2 billion people in China watching a movie, and they've got no way to track that stuff. International box office and I don't know, accounting or whatever.
Yeah, I did not specifically run across that one in my research, but it's very possible that you did, and that is an issue. I tend to think that monitoring is an issue in general, since corporations have a vested interest in not being transparent, if it means they pay less. Okay. So I think the bottom line is there's a whole bunch of issues that the writer's strike is fighting about. And while I hope it doesn't get worse, it could get very, very much worse. And we'll see what happens in June.
Wasn't there also an issue of like quotas as far as how many writers to hire per show?
So I guess the Typically for a show, you have like what they call a writer's room, which is usually like 7 or 8 writers that collaborate together to write a show. Some of the streaming services have started using what they call a mini room, which is like 2 or 3 writers, and they use these guys on they're writing episodes before production starts or anything, and then they kind of get rid of these guys before the show starts. And so it kind of makes the writer somewhat disposable rather than you needing your writer's room.
Well,
So
I
the
think
writer's guild, yeah.
yeah, I think that's true, but I think there also is the issue of quotas, meaning that they want to argue that you should be able to, or that production companies need to meet a quota of how many writers they have on their show. And I will say that I would throw a flag on the play for the writers in that regards. I think that there shouldn't be a quota. I mean, if 2 great writers can do the job, then that's great. If you need 10, that's fine, but there shouldn't be a quota on that. So I would actually,
if Quentin Tarantino can write his own script, that's fine. You don't need to hire any other quota writers to help with that.
Yeah. So I guess we can find things to agree with and disagree with on either side.
Yeah, I think we probably need more information there because I think that's hitting in the same area of mini rooms versus writers' rooms. Like how many do you need, and is it fair to say thank you for writing this, goodbye, now the rest of us will do the production, we don't need you any further. That's cutting off some revenue that writers might reasonably have expected by being part of a show. I don't know. I'll admit what I don't know.
Can I throw out a final question for you guys?
Sure.
As authors, do you feel like you have any skin in this game, or do you feel like emotionally invested in this at all?
Well, for me personally, I have future plans of writing screenplays. In fact, one of my novels soon, I'm actually going to write it as a screenplay first. That'll, it'll go from the outline to the screenplay, which will focus primarily upon dialogue. And, it'll have light context, descriptions of the locations and stuff, but it'll only be 100 pages instead of, a 300 or 400 page novel. So I've got the software for it, and I've done experimentation with it. So I would love to get into the screenwriting game, and actually write screenplays for all my novels eventually. It would increase the likelihood that my novels would get made into a movie, and I'm all for that.
And I'm somewhat in the same boat in that, especially when it's a dialogue heavy story, I will sometimes start in screenplay mode and then kind of novelize it later on. But more importantly, a lot of the novelettes that I write, in my humble opinion, are just the right size to be made into a movie. So while I don't necessarily plan on writing those screenplays, I would like, for instance, for someday to be able to option my works to producers in Hollywood and potentially have them produced. And in fact, I did get some interest around one of my short stories about turning it into a short film. So it's not actually, implausible or unlikely for me. And I know the same thing has happened to Marty.
Yep. And in conversations, once they start talking about making a movie of one of your novels, their very first questions is, hey, do you have this in screenplay format? And to date, the answer's always been no. And so I'll be changing that in the future. So I don't have skin in the game as of today. And it'd be even more complicated to get skin in the game because you have to, join the Writers Guild, if you want to really get serious about it and stuff. So
for me, I feel like I maybe should be more emotionally invested than I am. I've been following it. I've been, sort of analytically looking at what each side wants, with interest. I guess it's just writers write in so many different ways and so many different mediums. And sometimes it's hard to feel connected to such a huge community that just had, a lot of people do their own thing. They're in different industries. but but I do believe in the communal, we need to make sure that we have each other's back kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I guess skin in the game, maybe not so much right now. Same thing.
Yeah,
But
I
I'm following.
believe I would like to have skin in the game. I would like to have my work adapted sometimes. But I also feel like as a writer, I am not interested in seeing big soulless corporations making money off the backs of writers without at least giving them a fair share. And for me, it means sticking it to a corporation like Netflix or Disney or whatever. It also means I feel the same way about traditional publishers who are not providing good boilerplate contracts for new or unpowerful writers out there.
And the problem is there's no self-publishing or indie publishing that a screenplay writer can do on their own. They still have to sell it to a producer. So
at the end of the day, what you start off with is a blank page, and writers fill that blank page, and they should get paid for it one way or another. I don't care what industry you're in.
Yep. Okay, that's a good note to end on. Thanks again. Shay, feel better.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next week. Ciao.